Welcome back to the Bonafide Truth. I'm your host, Bonafide Soldier, and today we're going to be discussing the origins or the inspirations for the story of Cain and Abel and the story of Jacob and Esau. Now, these two stories are influenced or inspired by a few stories. For instance, with Cain and Abel, they are inspired by the story of Emesh the shepherd and Inten the farmer, and they are being judged by Enlil to see which one provides the better service to these gods. And these are also two divine beings, just as Cain would have been and Abel in the original rendition of the Genesis story, because we know that Adam was made through the substrates of Adama, who is a goddess of the earth, and we know that Eve is the human representative or the semi-divine avatar of Asherah that has been grafted from the story of Ninti and the being of Hawat, which is another name for Asherah. And we know that the Israelites are taking inspiration from other Canaanite stories, and Canaanites are taking inspiration from Ugaritic stories that are taking inspiration from Mesopotamian stories. So we can see the direct lineage of where this story is getting its inspiration from. So we see that Cain and Abel is taking inspiration from the story of the farmer versus the shepherd. And this is also taking inspiration from the story of Gilgamesh and Enkidu. And it's taking inspiration from the story of Dumuzi and Enkimudu in the story of Dumuzi and Inanna. We know this because when they are talking about Jacob and Esau, for instance, right? We see that Jacob is the shepherd and Esau is the farmer, or he would be somewhat of a hunter also. So he could also be considered a shepherd. But we see the similar story that is going on as we see with Gilgamesh and Enkidu, where we see that Gilgamesh is the Jacob-like character, and Enkidu is the Esau-like character. Esau is known as being hairy and red, and this is similar to the characteristics of Enkidu. And we know that Jacob is seen as being the usurper. He usurps Esau. He usurps one of the Elohim to become Israel. That is his whole thing. Esau also is called Edom, and Edom is another word for man, or another word for red man. So we know that Esau is Edom, and Edom means man. So when he is usurped by Jacob or Yisrael, we know that this is Jacob usurping man, and then later on we see that he also usurps God. So this is Jacob usurping God and Jacob usurping man. This is why they say that Jacob strives with God, because he also did the same thing with man. He is a usurper. It is in his name. The name gives away the title. The story of Cain and Abel is also inspired by the story of Ashnan and Lahar. These are two goddesses, Lahar being the goddess of the shepherd and Ashnan being the goddess of grain. And we see that by the end of the story, they are both boasting which is more integral to life or to the fundamentals of Mesopotamian society. And we see that Ashnan wins this argument with the help of the delegation of the Anunnaki. They deliberate on who is more important to the livelihood of the people of Sumer. That is between the grain goddess Ashnan and the shepherd goddess Lahar. And Ashnan wins this debate. And it is proven that they need grain fundamentally in order for them to operate as a people. And we see similarly when they're talking about the story of Cain and Abel, we know that Yahweh is a shepherd-like deity. So of course, the shepherd is going to win in this case, that being Cain, and we know that the Israelites have built their lifestyle and their culture upon being shepherds. They are also nomadic. So we see the parallels in these stories and how they are borrowed from Mesopotamia. And then we also see the parallels in David versus Goliath in this story of Enkidu versus Gilgamesh, and he would have also been spoken of in the Book of Giants. We see them mention the deity or the demigod known as Gilgamesh. We also know that David and Goliath is influenced by the story of the legend of Aquat, and Aquat is about a young prince who is given a divine bow, and the goddess Anat becomes consumed with jealousy over this weapon, and she orchestrates his murder. And we see this is similar to David, who is decked out uh, in armor and refuses King Saul's armor. So we see that they are hearkening back to these stories in multiple ways. We see that in the story of Cain and Abel, we see that Yahweh is choosing the offering of Abel, which is the shepherd, instead of Cain. And in the Anunnaki variant of the story, this is Enlil, who would be the El of the Anunnaki. He is taking the side or taking the offering of the farmer, which would be N10. We see that this is a flip of the narrative. And that's because Yahweh is, or the Israelites, should I say, the Israelites are remixing these stories. That's why with the David versus Goliath story, instead of David coming to terms or being friends with Goliath, as we saw with Gilgamesh and with Enkidu, we see that David slays Goliath. And then in the story of Jacob and Esau, we see that Jacob usurps Esau instead of coming to terms with Esau being the firstborn and thus receiving the blessings. We also see this paralleled in the Cain and Abel story, where we see that Cain kills Abel. Now remember, Cain means to possess or to acquire, and it can also hint towards the word spear in some cases. But we see that Cain acquires the birthright of Abel when he kills Abel, and Abel represents breath. So we see that Cain killed the breath of life in man, because life is Eve and man is Adam, and Cain acquired the birthrights. But we also know that Cain could possibly be a demigod or a hybrid, because it said that Eve acquired Cain with the help of Yahweh. And this is why Seth is the appointed one, because Seth is now made the lineage through which Noah will be born, and through which Shem and the Semites, and by proxy the Israelites, according to the text, though we know the Israelites are Canaanites. And even if we give the text the credit that the Israelites are Shemites, they are still related to the Canaanites, and the Edomites are still called the brother nation to the Israelites, and we know that the Edomites are a Canaanite group. The Moabites are also related to the Edomites, and we know that the Moabites are a Canaanite group. We know that the Midianites are also related to the Israelites, and we know that the Midianites are a Canaanite group. The Moabites are related to the Israelites, and they are a Canaanite group. So really, it's straightforward, but they are remixing stories, and they are trying to explain their place within the kingdom of Canaan. This has been a short one, but this has been the Bonafide Truth, and I hope you learned something interesting today. Keep searching for the truth, stay vigilant, and keep scrutinizing everything that you see.